Derek owns a $680,000 house, a brokerage account with $210,000 in index funds, a rental property worth roughly $340,000, and a 401k sitting at $190,000. On paper, his net worth is somewhere around $1.4 million. He is, by any reasonable definition, wealthy. And in March of 2023, he could not pay his $4,200 rent after his landlord evicted him from the condo he was renting between moves. He had $1.4 million in assets and $1,100 in his checking account. That is not a budgeting failure. That is a liquidity trap. And before anyone says Derek should have planned better, he did plan. Keeping cash low while your assets compound is the mathematically correct strategy during the accumulation phase. Every dollar sitting in a savings account is a dollar not growing. Derek followed the logic all the way to its conclusion. What nobody told him is that the logic has an edge, and when you fall off it, you fall fast. The reason this catches so many high-net-worth Americans by surprise is that the entire personal finance conversation around wealth is built on one invisible assumption, that assets and cash are interchangeable. They are not. They never were. And the gap between them has a name, a mechanism, and a cost that almost nobody explains correctly. Here is what we are going to cover. Why net worth is a dangerously incomplete picture of financial health. The precise mechanics of why certain assets cannot be converted to cash on your timeline, no matter how much they are worth. And the framework that genuinely wealthy people use to hold liquidity without sacrificing returns. A structure most personal finance content either ignores or gets wrong. Stay with me through the mechanism section, because that is where most explanations stop too early, and stopping early is exactly why smart people get caught. Let us start with a number. According to the Federal Reserve's 2023 survey of consumer finances, American households in the top income quintile, people earning above roughly $130,000 per year, hold approximately 70% of their net worth in liquid assets. That means real estate, retirement accounts, private business equity, and long-duration investments. Liquid assets, meaning checking accounts, savings accounts, and money market funds, make up less than 8% of their total wealth on median. 8% liquid, 92% locked. This is not recklessness. This is the rational result of 2 decades of correct personal finance advice. Put your money to work. Max your 401k. Buy real estate. Invest in index funds. All of that advice is directionally right. None of it warns you what happens when you need cash in a time frame that markets, lenders, and legal processes do not care about. Meet Marcus. Marcus is 41, earns $185,000 a year, and has done almost everything right. He has a $520,000 primary residence with $180,000 in equity, a taxable brokerage account with $145,000 mostly in broad market ETFs, a 401k at $230,000, and a rental property he purchased 5 years ago, currently valued at around $310,000 with $95,000 in equity after the mortgage. Total net worth, roughly $650,000. Liquid cash in a high-yield savings account, $14,000. Then, in a single quarter, 3 things happen. He loses his job. His rental tenant stops paying rent and begins a formal eviction process in a state where eviction timelines run 3 to 5 months per local housing court data. And his car needs a transmission replacement that costs $4,800. Marcus is not broke, but Marcus is in a liquidity crisis. And what happens next is where the trap fully closes. Let us walk through each asset class he owns and explain, mechanically, why it cannot save him on his timeline. The rental property. Marcus has $95,000 in equity sitting in that building. But equity is not cash. To access it, he has one of 3 paths. Sell the property, which according to the National Association of Realtors takes an average of 25 days to receive an accepted offer in a normal market, followed by a closing process that runs 30 to 45 additional days for a financed buyer. We are already 55 to 70 days out, and Marcus has an active eviction in progress, which any competent buyer's agent will flag, shrinking his pool of willing buyers dramatically. Path 2. Take out a cash-out refinance or a home equity loan. These take 30 to 60 days to close under normal conditions, require full income documentation, and Marcus just became unemployed. His application will be denied. Path 3. Draw on a HELOC. Except here is something almost nobody talks about. During the financial crisis of 2008 and again in March 2020, major lenders including JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo unilaterally froze or reduced HELOC credit lines on investment properties, citing market volatility. This is documented by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. A HELOC on a rental property is not a reliable emergency tool. It is a fair-weather tool. The real estate equity is real. Marcus just cannot touch it in under 90 days without taking significant losses or being denied outright. Now the 401k. Marcus has $230,000 in there. He can access it, but the cost structure is brutal. Withdrawing from a traditional 401k before age 59 and a half triggers ordinary income tax on the full withdrawal amount, plus a 10% early withdrawal penalty. If Marcus is in the 22% federal tax bracket and he pulls $30,000, he owes $6,600 in federal income tax and a $3,000 penalty, for a total hit of $9,600. That is a 32% loss of purchasing power on every dollar he pulls out in an emergency. His 401k has a $230,000 balance. Its usable emergency value is meaningfully lower once you account for what it actually costs to access it under duress. He could take a 401k loan instead, which avoids the penalty. But here is where the mechanics get dangerous in a way most people do not know. Under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, if you lose your job while carrying a 401k loan, you now have until the tax filing deadline of the following year, including any extensions, to repay the outstanding balance or roll it into an IRA. That sounds like relief. But Marcus is unemployed. He has no income coming in. Where is he getting a lump sum large enough to repay that loan by April? If he cannot, the entire outstanding balance is reclassified as a taxable distribution and hit with the same 32% cost structure. The clock is longer now. The trap is identical. Now the brokerage account. $145,000 in ETFs. This one looks liquid. And for a patient seller, it is. But consider what Marcus is actually working with. His ETFs have an average cost basis of roughly $78,000 after 7 years of contributions. The current value is $145,000. If he needs $20,000 to cover 3 months of obligations, nearly half of that withdrawal could represent realized long-term capital gains. At the 15% federal capital gains rate, he is creating a tax bill that will land in April. At the exact moment, he is also trying to rebuild his emergency buffer after a period of unemployment. He gets the cash today. He owes the IRS months later, with no paycheck to absorb it. And that assumes the market cooperates. If the same economic conditions that cost Marcus his job also push the S&P 500 down 15 to 20%, which is historically common during periods of rising unemployment, his $145,000 becomes somewhere around $123,000 before he even places the sell order. Brokerage assets are theoretically liquid. They are not stably liquid. There is a meaningful difference between those two things. This is the full shape of the trap. Wealthy on paper, cash constrained in practice. And every path to liquidity is either slow, taxed, denied, or dependent on market conditions you do not control. Here is the part most personal finance content skips, and it is the most important piece. The liquidity trap is not simply about having enough emergency savings. Every financial advisor will tell you to keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash. That advice is correct, but incomplete. The deeper issue is what researchers at the Urban Institute and the JP Morgan Chase Institute have separately documented. The relationship between asset wealth and cash flow is nonlinear. As net worth rises, liquid reserves as a percent of total assets tend to fall, not rise. This creates what you might call a liquidity cliff, a range of net worth, typically between $500,000 and $2 million in total assets, where people are wealthy enough to feel financially secure, but not yet wealthy enough to have the diversified income streams and institutional credit access that genuinely high net worth individuals use to stay liquid without holding large cash positions. Above roughly $5 million in investable assets, the mechanics change entirely. At that level, private banks and institutional lenders offer pledged asset lines. You borrow against your portfolio without selling it, without triggering a taxable event and without disrupting compounding. JP Morgan Private Bank, for example, offers these lines at rates that float near the secured overnight financing rate, which was in the range of 5 to 5.3% as of mid-2024. You keep your investments intact and growing. You access cash at borrowing rates that are lower than most personal loans. You repay on your own timeline. This is not a secret strategy. It is a structural advantage that is architecturally unavailable below a certain asset threshold, because banks only offer it where the collateral is large enough and liquid enough to fully protect the lender. Marcus cannot access this. Derek could not either. And no amount of financial discipline changes that until the asset base itself crosses the threshold. So what can someone at Marcus's level actually do? Let us be precise about what works and what each option actually costs. The first legitimate tool is a securities-backed line of credit from a standard retail brokerage, sometimes called a portfolio line or margin lending facility. Fidelity, Schwab, and Interactive Brokers all offer versions of this to retail investors. You pledge your taxable portfolio as collateral and borrow against it without triggering a sale. Rates as of 2024 have ranged from roughly 6 to 11%, depending on the broker and the balance pledged. But the risk is non-negotiable to understand. If your portfolio drops enough, you receive a margin call requiring you to deposit cash or sell holdings immediately, often at precisely the worst moment in the cycle. During the COVID crash of 2020, the S&P 500 fell 34% from peak to trough in 33 days. Margin calls forced liquidations across portfolios at exactly that bottom. This tool is real and usable. It also amplifies downside at the exact moment downside is already happening. The second tool is building a calibrated liquid runway before you ever need it. The conventional advice is 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash. For someone with Marcus's asset structure, the correct number is not derived from a rule of thumb. It is derived from your slowest assets conversion timeline. Real estate and retirement accounts can take 90 days or longer to convert under benign conditions. Marcus carries $8,000 per month in fixed obligations. 6 months covers $48,000. Add a buffer for the tax drag of forced securities liquidation, and you are looking at a target closer to $60,000 to $75,000 in accessible liquid assets, not the $14,000 he was holding. The gap between those two numbers is the trap. The third tool is one of the most underused liquidity mechanisms in personal finance, and it requires no market timing and no penalty risk. It is the Roth IRA as a liquidity shield. Because you fund a Roth IRA with after-tax dollars, the IRS allows you to withdraw your contributed principal at any time, for any reason, with zero taxes and zero penalties. Not your earnings. Those stay locked until 59 and a half. But the dollars you actually put in are yours to pull back out whenever you need them, confirmed by IRS Publication 590B. Over time, systematically routing contributions into a Roth account builds a pool of accessible capital that sits inside a tax-advantaged wrapper. It grows tax-free when you leave it alone. It converts to an emergency valve the moment you need it. No other account type gives you both of those things simultaneously. Here is the reframe I want you to hold on to. We are taught to measure wealth and net worth. Net worth is a balance sheet number. It tells you what you own minus what you owe. It says nothing about velocity, nothing about how fast any given dollar can move from asset to emergency and back. The number that actually determines whether your wealth functions in a crisis is not your net worth. It is your liquidity duration, the total number of days between now and when you could convert enough assets to cover a genuine emergency without triggering catastrophic losses, denied applications, or punitive tax events. Most Americans with a net worth above $500,000 have a liquidity duration measured in months, not days. The wealthy on paper and the truly liquid are not the same population. The overlap between them is smaller than anyone admits. Derek had $1.4 million in assets and $1,100 in his checking account. He was not financially broken. He was temporally broken. His money existed in a time zone that emergencies do not wait for. The goal is not to hold more cash. The goal is to calculate your actual liquidity duration, map every asset you own to a realistic conversion timeline with real costs attached, and then build the thinnest possible liquid layer that genuinely bridges that gap. not 3 months of expenses because a rule of thumb says so. The exact number that accounts for your specific assets, your specific tax exposure, and the slowest realistic conversion timeline for your least liquid position. Calculate that number. Fund it precisely. Everything above it should be working. If this is the first time you have heard your net worth described as having a time dimension, share this with someone who needs to hear it.